Hi everyone, welcome to eLearnChat, where it is all about learning. I'm Rick Zanani, and today we've got with us Harold Muliati. He's normally our video producer, and he's doing that today, but he's also co-hosting. Today, let's see, who was supposed to be on today? Dr. Susan Nash, but she got stuck in traffic, so she couldn't make the show. So we've got a great guest in John Lay today from Talented Learning. Should be very interesting. Here we go.
All right.
This show is sponsored by Relate Corporation. Visit us at www.relatecasts.net. Thanks.
Well, we are back, and joining us in what we call our center position of power, we've got John Lay. He's the CEO of Talented Learning. He's also the lead analyst for the company. They are a research and learning management system company. They do work in the e-learning space. And John, we were talking pre-show, you've analyzed over 300 LMSs right now, and you're still sane, which is good. That says a lot. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Sane's debatable. And in the last 8 years, I've had a chance to review over 300 now of the possible 1,000 different learning systems that are in the marketplace.
You know, that's a great thing. I wish I had known about you 5-10 years ago, because people are always asking, what about this system? What about that? I've never heard of that one, or I don't know that one, or I do know this one. So you've got a great resource there in terms of what you're doing and everything else. What made you get into that part of the industry?
Well, I've been in learning systems and learning technology for 25 years. I've spent my whole career there. And for 14 of those years, I was an enterprise sales guy for two major learning management system providers. And during that time, living on the front lines of buying and selling, I just didn't think anything that I was reading from the industry publications and rags accurately described what we were seeing on the front line. And so I thought maybe there's an opportunity to be another voice in the industry from a different perspective of being on that front lines of buying and selling. So I quit my job, started Talented Learning, and we started reviewing systems right away and blogging about it. And now 8 years later, we have a few hundred blog posts and are running a podcast and a monthly webinar that's going into our 8th year also right now. So we've spent a lot of time and effort trying to get our arms around the industry and understand what all these different solutions do and how they can survive and what difference they're making in the marketplace. And we've made some good progress.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, you have two websites. One of them is talentedlearning.com. I think you have another one, correct?
Yep. And the other one is brand new. It's what I spent, and we spent most of the pandemic and quarantine building, which is the Talented Learning Center. The Talented Learning is our blog and has been a blog website for all these years. But we've mainly kept the juicy research behind our own firewalls, and we used them with our clients in our day job. We help organizations define their requirements, shortlist vendors, and buy the right LMS for them. But we've kept all our research kind of close to the chest with the Talented Learning Center. What we've done now is we're basically putting it out to the public or to our membership so that you can, in a very neutral way, research the vendor community based on your true needs and requirements and desires, and in an intelligent way, find the right place in the market and the right types of solutions that align with what you're going to do. The reason there's so many solutions, learning system solutions in the marketplace, is that they all do different things for different use cases. At least that's our theory. And so certainly some try to do everything for all, but the majority of what we run into are organizations that try to specialize based on industry or target audience, like customers or employees or students or region. There's a lot of different ways to specialize. And that's what these organizations do. They draw their box much smaller and then try to find organizations that really need exactly what they've built. And it's a big change from 10 years ago where everybody tried to build everything at the same time. Specialization is the rule of 2021.
That's interesting. Now, you know, one of the things I've always noticed about LMSs on the whole is that, now you sold LMSs, so you know both sides of it. And part of what I'm going to say is probably what benefited you many times, even though I think you worked with some of the larger ones. And many times when you're dealing with the learning people, they have no idea what they're looking for in terms of the LMS. and even less of an idea of what an IT solution would be. In other words, they don't look at the LMS as a solution that IT would manage for them, because many times they do. They just look at it as, I get to track my people and do this and do whatever. What are the things I'm doing with talent, and try to figure out where our performance is. And then they buy them, or they lease them, whatever they're doing. And they realize, gee, this solution's slow, or gee, that solution's really expensive, or gee, that. So there's a lot of gee whiz moments after the fact, because nobody ever vetted it for them in their own company. Did you run into that a lot? Because I was an ex-VP of IT, so I've got an IT background before we got into training. And as a result, I would ask a lot of questions about indexing. How do you guys index? What do you index? What's your database look like? And so I get into nuts and bolts quickly to find out, is this going to run well for the company? How many users are we running? How many pieces of software? If you're hosting it, what are we doing? Blah, 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 blah. That doesn't happen all the time. And I think that's part of why people are unhappy with the LMS. It's not necessarily the LMS fault. I think the people don't have a clue what they're doing.
I think to some degree that is the case. In my 14 years of selling learning management systems, as you become more senior and grizzled and pessimistic about everything, what you realize is that there's really good buyers, and you know them right away, because they do things like they have a cross-functional stakeholder team that has not just the business users, but IT and procurement, in from the beginning, so that you can really get, the full 360-degree look of what those requirements are. Not just your functionality, but what are you going to need for service? How are you going to sunset your existing system and migrate your data and your content and roll that out to your new users? All the things that you mentioned from an IT perspective and security perspective. Yeah. A lot of times what buyers do, unsophisticated buyers, is just think about the functional requirements. They download the spreadsheet that has 1,000 must-have requirements, and they say must-have for 998 of them. And what that leads you to is the biggest, most expensive system that are generalist, and you think you're making a good decision, but then you hit those gee whiz moments you're talking about almost immediately, because it's either too big or too heavy, or there's too much that you're not using, or it's too hard to configure, or too expensive, or too many clicks for users. And those things all manifest themselves for organizations that try to compress and take shortcuts in the buying phase, which is incredibly important.
Yeah, and it is a long buying phase, especially the bigger the system. I think they average somewhere between 6 months and probably over a year easily, especially on a big client, especially when you have migration issues and everything else. But a lot of people don't really realize how complex putting in an LMS system can be. It doesn't have to be, but many times it is, because of all that. Now when you mentioned the requirements of, I hate those RFPs. There's a billion things on them, and you go, really, you've got 100 people you're tracking, and you really need to know all this, huh? And they're buying it from somewhere, or they found it somewhere on the internet and go, I want every one of these 1,000 questions answered. And you know why? No, but it's right here, so I need it. It just makes for an interesting pain in the behind kind of situation for all of us. And they're never happy at the end, because one of those 1,000 requirements won't be there, even though they've never actually needed it before. Or the other one, that I'm sure you've run into this one, cross-domain issues, where you have a company that's big, distributed all over the place, and content is coming from your company to them across a different domain. That's one of the biggest problems we've seen with big companies and LMSs that we've been involved with, that it takes a while to make sure it comes in right, and that the security is there, and that the performance is there. That's a tricky one. And again, the learning people are going, no, it's not working. But they don't know why it's not working. They don't understand, well, that's because you have other issues. And like you said, there are exceptions, but there's also, I think, the more common, we don't know what we're doing. Help us.
Certainly, I run into organizations like that. What I've noticed over the last 20 years, though, is that the learning organizations are getting better at buying. Certainly earlier on in my career, I thought I was much more negative about it. Now what I run into more often than not is, since organizations, very commonly are on their second, third, fourth LMS now. And for different audiences, you're starting to get that organizational knowledge that transfers down on how to buy and best practices. And maybe not just best practices, but because they face the hard knocks of reality the hard way. And so those lessons aren't quickly unlearned when you step into a pitfall. For example. And so generally organizations are getting better, but for sure, if an organization is on their first LMS, there's a good chance they're taking it a shortcut in the buying process.
What do you think people struggle with the most right now as far as an LMS goes, or even looking for an LMS?
Well, right now in the last 18 months, of course, we've had accelerated digital transformation. So many organizations of all types in all industries were somewhere on the path of live instructor-led training to online learning, somewhere inside that spectrum over the last 10, 15, 20 years. But then overnight, every organization had to get there immediately and have their content there. And that caused all kinds of stress and pain because learning systems are designed to do different things. You may think that they're all the same, but they're really not. Maybe they all manage content and they all manage users, but how they do that and if they can do it in multiple times or across domains or for different distinct audiences, those are all levels of complexity that are different. But moving to virtual and blended type learning put a lot of stress on systems that weren't designed to do that, or maybe weren't designed to integrate easily. And so lots of organizations over the last 18 months were faced with a system hitting the wall with their current system and trying to get a new one. The biggest problems for organizations, though, is managing the different audiences. So 10 years ago, everybody just managed their employees, and maybe their employees had different flavors, but generally they were all employees. They were all in the same HR system. They were all using the same single sign-on system. But now most organizations just can't do employees anymore. Customer learning and training your customers and your prospects and training your partners and your distributors and your resellers is every bit as important to organizational learning. And so you essentially have to have 3 learning management systems that are acting differently for the different audiences because they're not in your HR system, they're in their CRM system. They have different single sign-ons and they're taking content different ways and needing different content. And so all those things provide stress on learning organizations that helps them hit the wall and eventually force a change to a system that can juggle the new realities of fully digital and now all the audiences simultaneously, almost happening overnight.
So what do you think happened because I've heard this from different people, that because of the sudden jump, like you said, during the pandemic, to a lot more need for bandwidth, what happened to a lot of the systems as far as performance went?
I think performance is a lot less of an issue than it used to be. I think a lot of performance was the challenges behind the firewall type installations. So you had to get IT involved. You had to, get your server specs and have your right backups and your mirrored servers. And you had to set up that whole environment. And a lot of times I think LMS vendors ended up holding the bag for that, even though it was the IT's responsibility to deploy something sufficient to be able to support whatever their footprint is. But now with the cloud, it's really easy. The way the vendors describe it, just about everybody is in AWS, Amazon Web Services. Yeah. If they need to spin up a new place in Germany, it's just nothing but opening up their wallet, and they can spin up new bandwidth, new servers, and so in the buying process, that part and responsiveness. And just how quick the applications are has kind of taken a back seat in the buying process, because as soon as vendors say AWS, the IT say, okay, all right, we're okay. That's fine. So that part's gotten a lot easier. That gets rid of the
whole problem, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does, because in yesteryears, that would be one of the biggest parts of the buying process is checking all the IT boxes, because it's so easy to go wrong and servers were so expensive. And, it really is something that you had to draw a tight box around to be successful.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. Now, as far as your services go, so we understand more about what you do. So you do a lot of the reviews of the different, you analyze, you kind of figure out what they do and how they would work for people. Do people hire you folks to really figure it out so that they know what to look at, where where to go and just have a better idea rather than kind of hit that morass all at once face first. You kind of guide them through that.
That's exactly it. So for 14 years, as I was selling learning management systems, I saw the right way and the wrong way to do things. And as I became a student of the buying and the selling process, what I wanted to do was basically turn my cap around and take everything that I learned and work for buyers and help buyers do it. And so I created a best practice from A to Z, all the way from identifying the marketplace to defining your business case to defining your requirements, your functional, your technical, your service, your implementation support, your license requirements, taking all that, writing an RFP, shortlisting the vendor solutions in the marketplace that align with what they're trying to do, and then conducting that, what everybody cringes at, but we try to make easy, a professional buying process using a request for proposal and use case demonstrations all the way to sandboxes and references. So we created the whole process. The whole process is there in the industry. We just defined one that we were going to use time and time again that worked well. And so what companies do is we blog about our solution. We have lots of free public educational thought webinars and podcasts like yourself. And people come to us then after listening to that and say, can you help us? And so we guide them time and time again through that same process. That's pretty much all we do from a consulting. We don't do it differently for other organizations. We know what works. And if you follow these steps, what you're going to do is find a solution that matches what you need. And when you do that, then you won't hate your LMS anymore. You'll actually use your LMS for business benefit. And that's the next stage of maturity model.
Yeah, isn't it funny how the LMSs are all hated? It's just, it almost
it was like being a car salesman for a lot of time in my life.
I know.
I mean,
I'm like, hi, I'm selling for so-and-so. You know,
I guess a lot of times it just boils down to that's the thing they're looking at while they're getting angry. And it's not a person, so it's easier to blame that.
Yeah. I think a lot of what happened before the cloud is that organizations were forced to buy your license up front. And so a lot of organizations would have to spend $200,000 or $1 million up front. And then they would own that license forever. But what happened is that they'd spend that money and then the implementation would go rocky, and for one reason or another, for lots of reasons. And the vendor wasn't incentivized because there was never another million around the corner. But now what's happening is that the solutions are licensed on a monthly or an annual basis. So vendors are continually incentivized to keep their clients happy because there's always the next month, there's always that next year recurring revenue. And so just that recurring revenue model was the attitude adjustment I think that the industry needed for LMS vendors to care a whole lot more after the license sale. And it's been good for our industry for sure.
That's good. That is good. What do you see as the biggest challenge right now facing the LMS industry?
Well, I think the biggest challenge facing buyers is the introduction of these new specialties. So employee learning and compliance and talent management and performance management has really been around for decades. And so that part of the industry is really mature and understood. But the new part, and this is the part that's screaming hot on fire, and that is training your customers and training your partners. Right. And the reason being is it's so measurable. Like you have your employee LMS, and if you avoid compliance compliance fines, maybe that's some, return on investment, or you say, okay, we're going to train our leaders, but it's really hard to say, okay, that added 2% of revenue onto the company. Those connections between the training and the ROI are shady at best and really hard to quantify. However, with customer learning and prospect learning, it's the exact opposite. You can sell or bring on 100 new customers and certify 50 of them on your products and services that they bought and look to see how they perform against 50 that didn't certify. And so you can look in your CRM and say, okay, well, did they renew more? Did they call support more? Did they hit time to productivity? Have they expanded their sale? How often? You can take all these different metrics and track it. And so organizations now are to say, okay, we'll spend 100,000. We get 500 back. Great. Let's spend 500. We'll get 2.5 back. And it's this process of not just having an LMS so that you don't get compliance fines. But now you're using it to make a competitive differentiation, because if your competitors are using learning to attract customers and then onboard them more successfully, they're going to win in the marketplace. So people always in our industry always talked about education getting a seat at that executive table. And it's always been hard in training in HR, but it's not hard in extended enterprise, facing outside with customers and partners, because that return is so demonstrably measurable and provable that it's turned into a real business focus of actually moving the needle on from a competitive standpoint and a revenue standpoint, and not just a cost avoidance. And so that new dynamic has been really hard for training people, because HR, instructional designers and the equivalent just don't get that hardcore business training in their education. And the new LMS people are basically 1/3 marketing, 1/3 business, and 1/3 learning, all wrapped in together. So it's a whole different skill set. And that change of skill set and the change of ownership of who's owning these learning management systems has also led to answer your question in a long-winded way, also led to probably the biggest challenges that organizations are having right now. Staffing those teams and really getting the most out of them is what everybody's trying to do.
Kind of changing that whole mindset.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it makes sense, because if you can get sales to increase based on training performance, as you train your vendors or you train your clients, all of a sudden, what a difference. It makes just much more sense, because a lot of learning organizations today are focused on the internal still.
Yeah.
The bigger companies are starting to go, what differentiates us? How do we do better? How do we make our clients better? And or how to make them better use our products or whatever you're selling. And that makes a whole lot of difference. It just makes sense. I mean, it's been done before, but it wasn't done easily. And the LMSs had nothing to do with that in those days. So sometimes you'd have sales organizations or product organizations that would train either value-added resellers or something else, but it was sort of laborious and it wasn't really tracked. It was just there. You train people, but never expected anything to come out of that. Now, like you said, they're saying, wait a minute, we can track the fact that if we train those people, all of a sudden we're making a lot more. It's not just training for cost, because sometimes they charge, sometimes it was free. It just depends on the company. But if you can, like you gave the perfect example. Well, we spent 100,000, but we got 500,000. Now you've got the sales wheels are spinning, going, hey, this is a good thing. And then the ops people are going, well, great, we can train our people internally to support them better. But now they know more, so we don't have to spend as much supporting them.
Exactly.
Money saved there as well. So you've got that full circle of performance being done in a much more intelligent way, I guess is a good way to put it.
Yeah, human performance really translates into corporate and organizational performance now. And I think that's what we always wanted as an industry. The evolution of this external and extended enterprise has really given us the extra tools in our kit to show how much value our industry brings to the organization, or training and development brings to the organization. Something we always knew and believe, I think. But
yeah, and I'm curious, because I always hear a lot of stuff about the xAPI, xAPI, or whatever the current buzzword is, tin can, whatever they want to call it. But a lot of it's about PLNs, private learning networks, or personal learning network. Companies don't really give a damn about your personal learning network. They care about what they're doing, and it doesn't really address that. And so as a result, I think most companies hear about xAPI and they go, so what does it do for me? Nothing really. It does something maybe for the employees, but it doesn't do anything for the company per se that they perceive. And so it's a kind of an interesting approach, because now looking at what's going on with the other side of it, where you are training clients, you're training vendors, you're training other people that can really benefit your company from what's going on, it's a different approach. It's not so much about that one individual and, how many YouTubes did they watch yesterday and did it make any sense? It's more about how it all ties together for an organization, for an enterprise.
And here's a good example. So xAPI was the next generation of SCORM, because what it allowed you to do was track a lot of those informal things, just like watching a video that you said that doesn't have a formal test. And so that provided value actually, it didn't provide a ton of value since it never caught on fire for employees. But the idea of it is that if you knew those different pieces about how a learner was responding, with all the informal things combined with the formal, you would be able to adapt, show them different content, perhaps suggest different content or help them in their daily lives. It never really materialized because it's a great idea, but operationally it was hard. But once again, on the external facing side, we already do all that stuff with a CRM, with HubSpot and Salesforce. Marketing departments are already tracking what web pages you read, how long you were on each paragraph, what you clicked on, what page you want from here to here to here. And I came to the trade show, or they downloaded this white paper or attended this. Their marketing departments are already doing that, and they're not using xAPI. They're just using HubSpot or any other CRM system like Salesforce. And so, but they use all that data now to actually do what we wanted to do with xAPI, because you can take all that business data then and say, wait a minute, this person bought this product, they started the certification, but they didn't finish it, and now they called support. Let's put them in this bucket, which says, hey, we're going to do a special action of trying to get you re-engaged back into that certification so that we can close that gap, and you'll stop calling support. And so they can do all kinds of personalized interventions now that are automated by tracking all these things that are actually happening outside the learning management system. So xAPI was the right idea, but the marketing industry moved faster, and that's actually what people are using more now.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So the changes and everything. So that's exciting.
Personalized learning.
Yeah. What do you see as the future?
I think it's exactly that. More and more and more vendors are using artificial intelligence and machine learning to hyper-personalize the experience for each learner. And so in the past, the LMS experience was personalized based on your job, your role, maybe your location. Now, instead of 3 things, it can be 3,000 different demographic things that are being tracked about you inside the LMS and outside the LMS, that allows you to have access to different contents, different prices, different promotions, different marketing events, different learning paths, all based on you and your learning path. And so one size fits all just doesn't work anymore. And that's not what learners want. That's not what, Instagram, that's not what any of your social media is. And so that whole learning process now of moving to that adaptive, hyper-personalized learning is probably one of the biggest trends. And the only reason they're doing that is because technology can enable it, and the hyper-personalization helps drive the business results that you're trying to measure in the first place, the increased sale, the reduced time to value, and so forth.
That sounds great. Now, here's our final question for the day. What do you think of e-learning? Do you think it's actually going anywhere? Is it changing? There's a lot of talk about e-learning is dead, e-learning is changing, e-learning is this, that. What do you see that going?
Well, it's here. I mean, it's never going away. I think a lot of what's gone away is the concept that you would have courses. You have this 2 or 3 hour course that you have to take, but now it's more of learners get the learning when they need it at the point in time, and then there's also formal learning and everything in between. And all of that is e-learning to some degree, no matter what the media is that you're delivering it to, or how formal it is, or how short or big it is. And so with that hyper-personalization, e-learning is here to stay. It's just going to be more useful to the individual.
Yep, and maybe hopefully to the companies too.
Hopefully, yeah. If it's to the one, it has to be to the other. Yeah,
yep.
I think.
Yep. Well, John, it's been a pleasure having you on and learning about your company and what you do.
Outstanding.
We're definitely going to put you on our website as resources for people who are looking for things like that. Because I didn't know about your company before.
Awesome.
So thank you, LinkedIn.
Hey, we're too quiet.
I met Joelle, who works with you, and I think she connected with me, and I asked her, would you like to come on the show? She goes, John would be better. So
she takes care of everything in the back. I take care of everything in the front.
No, that's great. That's great.
Split the company.
And and I'm glad we got to meet you and share with what you're doing, and I think it's a valuable service what you guys do. I think it's important and something good for everyone, because a lot of people don't know how to navigate. It's not an easy thing to navigate sometimes. If you don't know where to start, it can be tricky, and it's getting through a lot of the noise out there.
Organizationally, it's not good.
Who do you think is the big monster right now? The big kahuna in the e-learning, so not e-learning, but in the LMS space right now?
Mm-hmm.
Is there one in particular, or is it still growing?
Boy, with 1,000, there's a lot out of there. But you have the old guard that's certainly there, but the new breed that's really probably having the most steam would be organizations like Docebo or Absorb LMS or Learn Upon or Thought Industries, SkillJar are names of the hotter companies in the space right now. Yeah. The old guard still exists. The Cornerstone Saba and SAP still exists.
Yep.
But they're not very exciting solutions, and they're kind of long in the tooth, so they're not quite as popular as they were 10 years ago. Yeah, if you got a big global problem, that's where you have to go. If you don't, then there's a lot of other places.
Yep, sounds good. Well, John, again, a pleasure meeting you here on the show, and best of success in what you guys are doing, and we hope that continues and grows, and you guys do well. Sounds like you guys are doing
outstanding.
Great. So,
outstanding, Rick, Harold, thanks. Thanks for having me. It was a great experience. Thanks for the opportunity. Have a great day.
Our pleasure. Thank you. And if you're watching the show, please subscribe. Give any feedback. If you want to get a hold of John, we will have his information and website link below in the notes. You can find it on either LinkedIn. It'll be up on Facebook, YouTube, anywhere else. I think that's it. Oh, and Vimeo probably.
Yeah.
So anyway, we will see you folks next week on eLearnChat. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.